Do you think that if you are artistically talented, that experience and working hard can be equally as valid as formal education?
Well, there's no one way one learns. It's still a mystery. But some people learn best through a structured environment. Some people learn best through a free, unstructured environment. Uh, but I think in the long run, you learn to walk by walking. So it's the experience of doing whatever you have to do. And so much of education tends to be intellectual and lacking the on-hands experience of the actual doing of something. So you can read a lot of books about how to walk, but you learn to walk by walking. Martha Graham said in her autobiography, The American Choreographer, in the opening line, she says, "I am a dancer, I learn by practice."
Formal education can only give you a framework, but at the end of the day, I don't think you need a formal framework in order to succeed. I think if you have a vision and have an artistic inclination that is so strong that this is what you want to spend the rest of your life with, I think one can come just with that little camera that you have there right now and do terrific work. And I think in recent films and independent films that now have sort of, and having these little cameras has unlocked so much potential of, if you will, laymen. You can have a fantastic product. I think a formal education usually gives you time to experiment and time to gain some experience. But I don't think you need to have a formal education in order to succeed.
Namjoon Pike predicted in the 70s that in the future everyone would be able to have their own TV channel. 30 years later, this has become a reality, and we have YouTube and MySpace and other highly visible websites. Our discussion will be seen on both these sites, and the TV networks can't, show these interviews till tomorrow. What role do you think technology plays in the future of the arts, and are there any new technologies you consider working with? Both.
Katerina, why don't you?
No, why don't you?
You go ahead.
Why don't you? Yeah, technology. I tell you, I don't know. I think a world without the performing arts would be a terrible world. I think a world where you can receive everything at home, hence you will have the experience of all of these visual impressions, whether it's a film or the stage, i.e. even if the stage play was filmed and transmitted on the internet, you would have these experiences alone. So while I think on the one hand it is terrific as a medium to use and to share things all over the world, I think on the other hand it is also dangerous in the sense that you will miss the communal experience of a work.
And Mr. Wilson?
Well, I think I agree with Katerina. I think that technology has brought us all much closer together. In the early 60s, I worked in a hospital that had no television, and I worked hard to bring television into wards where people were quadriplegics, who mostly in iron lungs, and did not know anything about the outside world. These were people isolated geographically in the middle of an island, the East River here in New York. And it was fantastic how they could then see someone getting on a bus in India, or what the situation was like in Chad, or what it was like just here in Manhattan. They had no idea of the world. I just came from Melbourne last night, where I performed a work with 53 people from Southwest Sulawesi. Most of these people have never been on an airplane, they've never been in a building, they've never seen a TV, they've never been in an elevator. They live in small villages in Southwest Sulawesi. To see them perform firsthand in a village is something very different than to see them on a TV screen. It's just simply different. The emotion's different. What we feel is different. Our understanding is different. I'm not saying that one is better, but it's certainly a completely different experience. And I think that man will always come together in communal gatherings through live events. It's part of the nature of man. It's been since the beginning of the history of man and will continue.
Cool. What made you want to do this picture with Mr. Wilson?
Well, I'd seen his theater works in Europe and at the Brooklyn Academy. And I think one thing is true about Robert Wilson. If you've seen one Robert Wilson play, you'll never forget it. And I never did. And then we met one summer, and I was working on a project about artists and their muses. And I talked with Bob, and he told me about his muses, Raymond Andrews, the African-American black deaf-mute child, and Christopher Knowles, can one say autistic? He doesn't have an autistic child. He did a lot of stage work with, and those muses were so extraordinary, and in combination of the work that was so extraordinary, that seemed like the project to do.
Mr. Wilson, when you work with young artists, how do you direct them and help them unlock their potential?
Well, I think there's no one approach to working with young artists, but one key is always to listen. And if you listen to the individual, they pretty much will tell you the direction one should go. And as a director, you're someone from the outside, so you just give a frame for them. And so usually I try to find a frame that I think is appropriate or right for this individual, and then you let that person fill it in. And the frame is not so important, it's how you fill in the frame, that's what's important.
Do you agree with Marina Abramovic, who said that the function of the artist is to change the ways humans can think, and artists have to be analysts of society?
Well, I think that it's true that artists often bring about changes in the world. Strange in the way they work and find things that later you see mathematicians, scientists, anthropologists, or people in different fields of study have been influenced or directed by things that artists have uncovered. But me personally, it's not a goal of mine as an artist, is to change the world. Whether it happens or not is one thing, but I'm not out to change the world with my art.
I will, however, answer in your words, because that I find very interesting about Robert Wilson's work, that you once said, art, religion, and politics divide men, but art can bring us together. I think art is a form of dialogue. Art records the history of our time. We don't know how the Romans live, but we can imagine it because the art is there. The sculpture is there. You can go back to the cavemen, they live through their art. So in a way, art, in a strange way, is a sort of, the anthropology of our time. It records our time. I don't know if the abstract expressionists record our chaos, but certainly that is to judge for the historians. I think the function of art is immense in our society and very, very important, yes.
As you work with performers, do new ideas appear during the rehearsal process, or is everything set out beforehand?
No, I think most of the ideas come about in my work and is in the making of it. I used to be less secure and try to prepare before I would start a rehearsal. And as I got older, I learned that a lot of the things that I would do would be a waste of time because I was trying to make something that was in my head instead of looking at what was at hand, looking at the people in the room, listening to the sound, listening to the music, listening to their voices, watching the way they move. Let the piece talk to me instead of talking to it. So more and more I think it's better to go in the room with not so many ideas and let the work direct itself.
If you had to put on a creative work about, I don't know, what was going on today with all the craziness in the world, what might you do? How might it start off? Like if you had to pick, I guess, a topic that was near and dear to you currently, maybe the war or maybe something in Africa and Darfur, how might you begin the art piece?
Well, I just finished a rather long telephone call about 45 minutes ago with Bernice Johnson Reagan. She's an Afro-American intellectual, one of the leading authorities on Afro-American history. And we created a work called The Temptation of St. Anthony, which is going to be performed in a few weeks in Warsaw in the Opera House. And I think this work is highly appropriate for today. As Katerina said, politics, religion often divide man, but spirituality can bring man together. What is fascinating to me about the music that Dr. Reagan wrote for this 19th century text of St. Anthony is that it goes back to the Negro spiritual. And the Negro spiritual music, that entire body of music, there's not one song that's negative. There's not one song that's a protest. This is a group of people that are beaten, chained, enslaved, not allowed to read a book except the Bible, living under terrible conditions. Have written a body of music that is about hope. This is something that is remarkable, one of the roots of American music. We go back to the spirituals before the gospels, before the blues, before the jazz, before the rock, before the rap. We go back to the spirituals. So I think in this body of music, this voice coming from these people is something that needs to be heard, whether it's in Chad or whether it's in Iraq or anywhere in the Middle East, and Lebanon with the Palestinians, with the Israelis, even Sulawesi, where I just was, Eli Gallego, the conflict between the Muslims and the Christians there. There's no conflict within the Negro spiritual music. So I think if we go back to this body of work, it can be a very much needed voice for today.
Cool. Thanks so much for meeting with me. It's an honor. A lot of people that watch my work, it's just strictly on the internet, and people who maybe don't go out to plays or performance arts, who just watch a quick 3-minute soundbite of some guy jumping in the air and hitting his head. What can you tell this audience maybe piqued their interest?
Well, I think what touches people about this film, which is the biography of Robert Wilson, and on the one hand, we're looking at a portrait of an avant-garde artist, and many people shy away from the word avant-garde, but on the other hand, we watch a very unlikely career, and I think it hits us in the solar plexus because so many times we are not understood by our parents. I think the film is a testimony of a child who overcame disabilities, who didn't get along with his parents, who wasn't understood and was expected to perform in a certain way, but then performed in a completely different way and probably did so much more than what was expected of him. So I think it's a story of overcoming, and it's very funny too.
Any final words for the internet
I
audience?
think that it's I always say in the theater that the theater I make, it's something that you see and it's something you hear, and if you can't make theater without laughing, then don't do it. So it's not so serious, and I think it's something that
He
you
suffers with a smile.
can sit back and relax and just listen to the pictures.
Cool.
And enter a different world.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay,
Thank you. Pleasure. Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.